Before we go further, a quick but important correction is necessary. Multiple Philippine business and government-facing reports describe Anglicotech's planned investment as nearly 14 billion pesos, which translates to hundreds of millions of US dollars, not $14 billion. In other words, the peso figure is the anchor. The dollar figure appears to be a currency mix-up, and clarifying it matters, because credibility in defense investment begins with precision. With that context set, the real question becomes far more interesting. Why would a US defense logistics firm commit billions of pesos, not to weapons, but to infrastructure, in the Philippines right now? The answer lies in how modern deterrence actually works. In today's Indo-Pacific, power is not only projected by platforms, but sustained by supply chains. Missiles, aircraft, and ships deter only as long as they can be stored securely, maintained properly, and moved quickly under pressure. This is where Anglicotech LLC enters the picture. As a Virginia-based defense supply chain and logistics company, Anglicotech is not chasing headlines with hardware. Instead, its proposed phased investment in the Philippines targets the less visible but strategically decisive layers of defense power: storage, sustainment, distribution, and readiness infrastructure. These are the systems that determine whether an alliance can operate beyond the opening days of a crisis. Globally, capable militaries have already internalized this lesson. Japan's defense posture emphasizes logistics depth as much as forward presence. Australia's northern strategy prioritizes sustainment hubs alongside basing. In Europe, recent conflicts have brutally exposed how quickly combat power erodes without resilient supply chains. The Philippines, facing persistent maritime pressure and growing alliance responsibilities with the United States, is confronting the same reality. Seen this way, Anglicotech's 14 billion pesos proposal is not just an economic project, it is a signal that deterrence in the Philippines is maturing, from episodic procurement toward endurance, resilience, and readiness. If executed well, the investment could strengthen the country's defense industrial base, support deeper US-Philippines operational integration, and create high-skill local employment. More quietly, it shows a hard truth of modern security competition. Wars are not lost when weapons run out, but when logistics do. To understand why Anglicotech's proposed investment matters, it helps to first understand what kind of company Anglicotech actually is, and just as importantly, what it is not. Anglicotech LLC is not a traditional weapons manufacturer. It operates in the less visible but increasingly decisive layer of modern defense: supply chain management, logistics modernization, sustainment services, and support for foreign military sales. Its core business revolves around ensuring that military systems, once procured, can be stored, maintained, integrated, and deployed efficiently. In contemporary security competition, this function is critical. A military's effectiveness is constrained not by what it owns, but by what it can keep operational under stress. Anglicotech's interest in the Philippines is not speculative. The company has maintained an operational presence in Subic Bay since 2024, where it has been providing logistics and support services linked to both the Armed Forces of the Philippines and the United States Department of Defense. These activities reportedly include support functions related to C5ISR, command, control, communications, computers, cyber, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, as well as facilitation of foreign military sales. This footprint suggests that Anglicotech is already embedded in the operational ecosystem of the alliance, giving it familiarity with Philippine regulatory structures, military requirements, and joint operational workflows. The proposed expansion beyond Subic centers on the Aurora Pacific Economic Zone and Freeport Authority, commonly known as APECO. Located in Casiguran, Aurora Province, APECO spans roughly 13,000 hectares and includes strategic features such as an airstrip and access to a deep water port. Long envisioned as a development hub, the zone is now being repositioned as a potential center for defense logistics, sustainment, and possibly light manufacturing. Its geographic orientation, facing the Philippine Sea rather than the congested waters of the West Philippine Sea, adds to its strategic appeal for distributed logistics and redundancy planning. Crucially, APECO's positioning aligns with a broader policy shift in Manila. In October 2024, the Philippines enacted legislation formalizing its self-reliant defense posture strategy, which seeks to expand domestic defense-related capabilities, reduce overdependence on external suppliers, and encourage technology transfer through partnerships. Within this framework, foreign firms are not viewed merely as vendors, but as potential enablers of local capacity. Anglicotech's proposed activities, focused on logistics, sustainment, and support infrastructure, fit squarely within this logic. This context suggests that Anglicotech's 14 billion pesos plan is not an isolated commercial venture. It builds on an existing operational presence, leverages a strategically positioned economic zone, and dovetails with a national policy push toward defense industrial resilience. Rather than introducing a new concept into the Philippine security landscape, the investment proposal appears to formalize and scale trends that are already underway, shifting the focus of defense cooperation from episodic procurement to long-term readiness and sustainment. At the center of Anglicotech's proposal is a 14 billion pesos investment commitment, with the peso figure, not a multi-billion-dollar headline, serving as the credible anchor. While early references to $14 billion appear to reflect a currency misinterpretation, Philippine-facing disclosures consistently describe the plan in peso terms, placing it in the hundreds of millions of US dollars range when phased over time. What makes the figure significant is not its absolute size, but how it is allocated toward defense logistics, storage, and selective production infrastructure, rather than high-profile weapons platforms. The focus is on building depth, redundancy, and sustainment capacity at the Aurora-Pacific Economic Zone and Freeport Authority, positioning the zone as a long-term defense support hub. The structure of the investment reflects a deliberately phased approach, rather than a single front-loaded capital outlay. Anglicotech's plan reportedly begins with foundational infrastructure, facilities that are usable even in non-crisis conditions, and scales upward depending on regulatory clarity, operational demand, and alliance requirements. This sequencing matters. It limits political and financial risk, allows Philippine authorities to evaluate compliance and performance at each stage, and provides flexibility to adjust scope as defense priorities evolve. In strategic terms, it mirrors how modern deterrence infrastructure is built, incrementally, quietly, and with built-in adaptability. One of the most prominent components of the proposal is the construction of climate-controlled warehouses designed for the secure storage of military materiel, sensitive equipment, and time-critical supplies. These facilities are not only relevant to defense operations, but also to humanitarian assistance and disaster response, areas where the Philippines faces recurring strain from typhoons, earthquakes, and other natural hazards. Secure, environmentally controlled storage reduces degradation of equipment and allows faster deployment during emergencies. In effect, it strengthens both national resilience and alliance readiness without blurring the line between civilian and military use. Beyond storage, Anglicotech's plan reportedly includes defense production capabilities, with particular reference to ammunition and unmanned systems such as drones. If realized, these facilities would align closely with the Philippines' self-reliant defense posture framework, which prioritizes localized production, reduced external dependency, and gradual technology absorption. The emphasis appears to be on selective, scalable production rather than full-spectrum manufacturing, supporting operational needs while remaining within political and regulatory comfort zones. Finally, the investment builds outward from Anglicotech's existing footprint by expanding logistics, maintenance, and allied support operations already underway in Subic Bay. This continuity is important. Rather than creating a standalone enclave, the APECO projects would complement established logistics corridors, training pipelines, and foreign military sales support functions linked to both the armed forces of the Philippines and the United States Department of Defense. In strategic terms, the proposal is less about building something entirely new and more about connecting, reinforcing, and scaling what already exists. The investment overview points to a clear logic. Anglicotech is not seeking to transform the Philippines into a weapons exporter overnight. Instead, it is positioning the country as a logistics, sustainment, and selective production node within a broader alliance ecosystem, one designed to endure pressure, absorb shocks, and function when supply chains elsewhere are strained. At its core, Anglicotech's proposed investment aligns with a quiet but consequential shift in Philippine security thinking. Deterrence today depends as much on industrial depth and logistics resilience as it does on frontline platforms. By focusing on areas such as unmanned aerial vehicle logistics, munitions support, and sustainment-oriented defense manufacturing, the project directly supports the Philippines' self-reliant defense posture. Rather than replacing imports overnight, the aim is to narrow critical gaps, ensuring that key systems can be stored, maintained, and replenished locally when external supply chains are disrupted. In practical terms, this strengthens national security by reducing vulnerability at precisely the moments when pressure is highest. Geography further sharpens the logic. The Aurora Pacific Economic Zone and Freeport Authority offers attributes that are increasingly rare in the region. Direct Pacific access, comparatively uncongested airspace, a usable runway, and proximity to deep water port facilities. These features make APECO attractive not just for static storage, but for dual-use defense operations, such as drone logistics, testing, and training. Facing the Philippine Sea rather than the heavily trafficked West Philippine Sea, the location provides operational breathing room, space to move, train, and scale without the constant friction of crowded air and sea lanes. In an era of distributed operations, such geography is not incidental. It is strategic. This geographic advantage is also why APECO is well-suited for unmanned and logistics-focused activities. As unmanned systems become central to surveillance, resupply, and disaster response, they require airspace flexibility, secure facilities, and reliable logistics chains. Anglicotech has explicitly pointed to this opportunity. As David Cooper, the company's CEO, noted, "One advantage you can have when you aren't as developed as your neighbor is you can leapfrog. We could bring in an unmanned systems hub for Luzon." The statement captures a broader strategic insight. Late developers are not condemned to lag behind. They can skip intermediate stages and adopt systems optimized for current realities. The investment also fits squarely within the trajectory of U.S.-Philippines defense collaboration. Over the past decade, cooperation between Manila and Washington has expanded beyond exercises and hardware procurement into areas such as logistics support, sustainment, and foreign military sales frameworks. Anglicotech's project complements these efforts by adding physical infrastructure that can support allied operations without requiring permanent foreign basing. It reinforces interoperability while respecting domestic sensitivities, an increasingly important balance in Philippine defense policy. Seen together, these factors explain why the proposal carries strategic weight beyond its financial scale. The investment is not about signaling power through visibility. It is about embedding resilience into the defense ecosystem. By strengthening local capacity, leveraging favorable geography, and aligning with alliance logistics frameworks, Anglicotech's plan reflects a modern understanding of deterrence, one that recognizes wars are rarely lost at the front line first, but in the systems that sustain it. Beyond its defense logic, Anglicotech's proposed investment carries tangible economic and social implications, particularly for regions outside the traditional growth corridors of Luzon. The deployment of advanced logistics hubs, climate-controlled storage, and selective defense manufacturing facilities would generate direct employment in high-value sectors such as logistics engineering, systems maintenance, quality assurance, and facility management. These are not short-term construction jobs alone, but roles that require sustained technical competence. Over time, this can help shift parts of the local labor force toward more specialized, higher-wage skill sets, an outcome that aligns with broader national development goals. The presence of a U.S. defense-oriented firm, such as Anglicotech LLC, also creates conditions conducive to technology and process transfer. Even when core intellectual property remains protected, exposure to modern defense supply chain standards, inventory control, environmental storage protocols, quality certification, and compliance systems tends to raise local benchmarks. Philippine contractors, technicians, and partner firms operating alongside such facilities are often compelled to meet higher operational standards, which can have spillover effects across the wider manufacturing and logistics ecosystem. These benefits extend beyond the defense sector itself. Large infrastructure projects tend to stimulate secondary economic activity, including construction, utilities, transportation, catering, security services, and small to medium enterprises that support day-to-day operations. In regions such as Aurora Province, where industrial density is lower than in Metro Manila or Central Luzon, this multiplier effect can be particularly meaningful. Over time, such activity contributes not only to income generation, but also to local tax bases and public service funding. From the government's perspective, Anglicotech's proposal tests the Philippines' ability to translate policy ambition into execution. Philippine authorities, together with the Aurora Pacific Economic Zone and Freeport Authority, have emphasized the need for stable policy frameworks, regulatory clarity, and long-term planning to attract and retain defense sector investments. Defense-related projects are uniquely sensitive, involving export controls, security clearances, and interagency oversight. Predictability in these areas is often more important to investors than incentives alone. APECO itself has been undergoing reforms aimed at improving governance, streamlining approval processes, and clarifying land use and investment rules. These efforts are intended to reposition the ecozone as a credible host for responsible defense and dual-use industries, rather than speculative development. The Anglicotech project, if managed carefully, could serve as a test case for whether these reforms are sufficient to support complex, security-linked investments. Strategically, the vision articulated by APECO extends beyond defense narrowly defined. The authority has framed its long-term goal as developing Aurora into a multifunctional resilience hub, one that supports defense logistics, humanitarian assistance, disaster response, and broader economic activity. This framing is important domestically, as it situates defense-related infrastructure within a narrative of national resilience and community benefit, rather than militarization for its own sake. Despite its promise, the investment is not without challenges. Defense sector projects demand clear legal frameworks and tight interagency coordination, particularly where foreign firms are involved. Overlapping mandates among civilian regulators, defense authorities, and local governments can slow implementation if not managed proactively. For Anglicotech's plan to remain viable over the long term, these governance issues will need sustained attention rather than ad hoc solutions. Regional security dynamics also form an unavoidable backdrop. While the project is framed around logistics and sustainment, any expansion of defense-related infrastructure can attract scrutiny in a region marked by maritime disputes and strategic competition. Manila will need to balance development objectives with diplomatic sensitivity, ensuring that defense industrial growth supports stability rather than becoming a source of misinterpretation or escalation. Infrastructure readiness presents another practical constraint. Fully realizing the project's potential may require supplementary investments in transport links, utilities, power reliability, and possible airfield or port enhancements around APECO and its supporting nodes. Without these enablers, even well-designed facilities risk underperformance. The investment, therefore, should be viewed not as a standalone solution, but as part of a broader infrastructure ecosystem. At the strategic level, Anglicotech's proposal reinforces the evolving character of United States-Philippines relations. Rather than relying solely on government-to-government military assistance, the partnership is increasingly complemented by private sector defense-related investment. This diversification strengthens resilience by embedding cooperation across economic as well as military domains. The investment also supports greater interoperability by anchoring logistics, sustainment, and support functions within the Philippines. Over time, such infrastructure can make joint operations more efficient without requiring permanent foreign basing, a balance that aligns with Philippine domestic sensitivities while still advancing shared security objectives. Moreover, Anglicotech's expanded footprint could encourage other U.S. firms to explore opportunities in adjacent sectors, from advanced manufacturing to secure logistics. Taken as a whole, Anglicotech's planned 14 billion pesos investment, centered on the Aurora Pacific Economic Zone and Freeport Authority, is positioned to do more than add facilities to the Philippine map. It has the potential to strengthen defense industrial capacity, generate skilled employment, and deepen strategic ties between Manila and Washington through practical, infrastructure-based cooperation. Whether this potential is realized will depend on policy clarity, infrastructure readiness, regulatory discipline, and alignment with national priorities. If these conditions are met, the project could stand as a model for how defense-related investment can simultaneously support security, economic development, and long-term resilience, quietly, incrementally, and with effects that extend well beyond the balance sheet. If you like the video, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe our channel for deep analysis of contemporary issues.